Hello everybody, it's Mr. Burns, we're back, and we're also on camera as well. So yeah, hello. Yeah, I've got the webcam up. Yeah, it's been a long time since I've done a other video. I've relaunched the Mr. Burns channel after deleting my old one. And yeah, we're back, and and we're going to do I want to show you my awesome little background. That looks cool, doesn't it? Desktop background. We're going to do the spring updates. I nicked this picture from Gav's spring updates video that he did a couple of years ago. Just ignore that 2020, just pretend that says 2022. So yeah, Gav announced in a video that he wasn't going to do any spring updates. Like he said, he was going to bring back Fluffy the Bunny, and then he decided not to do the spring updates. But yeah, I've always enjoyed the long range updates, whether it's spring, summer, autumn, winter. I think Gav said not many people watch the spring updates. It's like his least popular types of videos, but they still have looked back and they still get quite a few people watching, several hundred at least. And yeah, it's just a nice thing to do. So I thought it would be a shame not. Why don't I do the spring updates instead? I have done videos for Gav in the past, so why don't I do the spring updates this year? And that's what I'm going to do. So I have had to get to grips with the analogues because they are pretty complicated, and yeah. So it's this website here. On Gav's videos, this says like 20th century reanalysis. This says NCAR reanalysis, but it's the same thing. So yeah. So this comes from the NOAA Physical Sciences Laboratory, and yeah. So yeah, these are very difficult chart. This is a very sort of complicated website to use. There's not many tutorials on how to do it. I did watch a couple of tutorials on YouTube, and yeah, eventually found my way to the correct site. And you do have to play around with the settings a bit so that you get everything right and stuff. So yeah, but I've managed to do it. And for this first update, we're going to look at autumns. We're going to sort of carry on from the winter updates because we have had a very warm autumn in the UK, as a lot of you will know, and it was actually the third warmest autumn on record. So yeah, I'll open up a web page. Third warmest autumn. Should have got this up before on record. UK. There we go. I get to see how slow my computer is. I'm using like a laptop with like 2 gigabytes of RAM. So, yeah, it's definitely not the fastest thing in the world, put it that way. But yeah, basically we've had the third warmest autumn on record, mainly down to the very warm September. So yeah, this shows it's the warmest autumn on record for Northern Ireland. England had its fourth warmest autumn at 11.64 degrees Celsius. So yeah. So anyway, so what we're going to be looking at, we're going to carry on from Gav's winter updates. We're going to have a look at the very warm autumns and the springs that followed. I was originally going to have a look at the warmest the top 20 warmest autumns on record. I was going to do that, but then I found that there were a lot of autumns that only had that had a CET of 11.0, and if I included those, it was like more than 20. But if I didn't include those CETs, autumns with CETs of 11.0 and the springs that followed, then there were actually less than 20. So it didn't really work out. So I thought, why don't I do autumns with CETs of 11.0 degrees or higher? So I've decided to do that, and there was a lot of years. You can only use like about 20 years with this software. You can see I've put. I'm sort of spoiling it for you. Just pretend you didn't see that, spoiling the result there. But yeah, might have to edit that out later. But yeah, so there were a lot of autumns in the UK which had a CET of 11.0 degrees or higher. So because of that, we're only going to look at years past 1950, and there was just enough like gaps in the software to do that, just enough places. I mean, to do that. So yeah. If there were any more years, I wouldn't be able to do this. Years with autumns of a central England temperature more than 11.0. So for those that don't know, the central England temperature, it's like the longest running temperature series on not just in the UK but on planet Earth. It goes back into like the 1600s or something crazy like that, and yeah. And it's basically based on the temperature data across 3 different weather stations in England. It's the mean temperature data, so they take the maximum daytime temperature, minimum nighttime temperature across every day, and do like monthly and seasonal and yearly CETs. So I'll just get my phone a minute, so that because the information's on my phone. So the central England temperature. Where did I put my phone? It's here. The central England temperature for autumn 2021, it was 11.8. So it's a very warm autumn, the third warmest on record. For the CET, only 2006 and 2011 were warmer. 2011 came out at 12.4 and 2006 came out at 12.6. So yeah, it has been a very warm autumn. So if we look at all the years post 1950, unfortunately there were quite a few years before 1950 that had ETs of 11.0, but unfortunately there were just 2 years, because you can only input so much data into this computer model, so you can only input so many years. So that's what I'm going to do. We're going to look at years. We're going to look at the springs that occurred after autumns with central England temperature of 11.0 or higher. So yeah, that's what we're going to do for this video. So we're going to start off with the earliest year and then proceed forward. So the first year was the autumn of 1949. So not quite 1950, but nearly there. So the autumn of 1949 had a central England temperature of 11.5 degrees. And let's just minimise that so you can see the screen. The spring that followed that autumn had looks like this. So this is the height reanalysis. So I'm sure if you've watched GavsWeatherVids, you've seen these charts before. So yellow, orange, and red extrapolates to high pressure above average heights, and the blue and purple and pink colours that extrapolate to low pressure or below average heights. So as you can see, for the spring of 1950, we've got high pressure over and to the west of the country. Let's just change the colour on that, because that's a bit hard to see. Let's change it to black. Maybe that's more visible. Yeah, I think that's more visible. So low pressure to the north. Probably bring the wind down from like a northerly direction a lot of the time. So it looks like quite a chilly spring for 1950, I would have thought. So let's go 1950. Let's go through to 1960. So the next autumn with a CET of 11.0 degrees or higher is the autumn of 1959, which also came out at 11.5 degrees. The spring that followed is the spring of 1960. The spring of 1960 looks like this. So we've got low pressure out to the west, high pressure over Scandinavia. Looks a bit of little bit of a battleground with the low pressure trying to bring in westerly winds, and the high pressure over Scandinavia trying to bring in easterly winds. It looks like probably the easterly winds would have probably won the battle most of the time. Probably had some influence from the Atlantic at times. There's some wet and windy weather coming in from the west at times, but overall I think probably the Scandinavian had the most influence. Easterlies in spring does tend to be your most easterly season of the year, and easterlies in spring can be quite cold. Can be severely cold actually. Think of the March of 2013. But as you get to like May, spring easterlies can actually be very warm. So it all depends how far into spring you will go, as spring is a transitional season, of course. So next we have got the autumn of 1968 with a central England temperature of 11.0. The spring of 1969 looks like this, with low pressure to the south, high pressure to the north, bringing easterly winds. Looks like quite an easterly spring again for the spring of 1969. 1971, so the autumn of so next we've got the autumn of 1970, I should say, which again had a CET of 11.0. The spring of 1971 looks like this, so again low pressure to the south, high pressure to north and west, winds in from easterly directions. So a lot of these spring do seem to have a trend so far for a lot of easterly springs, which would probably be like the driest weather to the north, closest to highest pressure, to high pressure, and the wettest weather to the south, closest to the low pressure. So next up we have got the autumn of 1978. This autumn had a central England temperature of 11.5. It's another very warm autumn, just 0.3 of a degree cooler than the autumn we've just had. The following spring was 1979, and this spring has deep low pressure over the top of the UK, so that just looks like a very unsettled spring. Just on a southerly track like that, so that looks like a cold and wet spring for the spring of 1979. A bit of a gap now. Next time we had an autumn of a CET of 11.0 degrees or higher was in the year of 1994. The spring that followed looks like this. So we've got high pressure to the south and west of the country, low pressure to the north and east. Winds generally from like a northwesterly direction, so probably quite a cool, quite a chilly spring, and probably quite unsettled as well for this spring of 1995. I have no idea what any of these years, when any of these springs were like on a day-to-day or a month-to-month basis, because sometimes these anomaly charts don't tell you the whole picture, because there can be a lot of intra-month variation, but I'm just going off the overall height anomaly, really. Next, we have the autumn of 1995 with a CET of 11.4, so a lot of these very warm autumns do seem to come in twos I've noticed when I've been doing this, and they do get more and more frequent as you go like into the 2000s and stuff, as you would expect, of course, with the warming climate. We've had a lot of warm autumns in recent years. So again, it's an easterly signal for the spring of 1996, with high pressure to the north, low pressure to the south, winds in from the east. And yeah, spring is our most easterly season. Of course, if that was in winter, that would be very cold. Probably a lot of cold lovers wish out winter was our most easterly season. It's very typical that in winter we get lots of westerly winds and mild and wet and windy weather, and then we get into like March, April in the east, we get a lot of northerly and easterly winds, and we get like cold, like a second winter in spring. That tends to happen a lot. It probably happened in the spring of 1996. As well, I think winter 1995, 1996 was a cold winter as well, an easterly winter. So it's probably carried on that pattern from the winter actually. As when you have a cold winter, the pattern tends to carry on into the spring. So you get a cold spring, well, a cold early spring anyway, March and maybe April as well. So the next year that we've got is the autumn of 1999, with a central England temperature of 11.4. The following spring was the year of 2000. This spring has high pressure out to the west, low pressure to the north, and down to the south, close to the Azores, quite unusually. Winds probably from like a north, maybe northeasterly direction, so probably quite a cool spring, but probably relatively dry. Next we have the autumn of 2001, which was another very warm autumn with a central England temperature of 11.4. The following spring of 2002 looks like this, with low pressure to the west, high pressure to the east, probably bringing the wind from off the Atlantics some of the time, so probably another battleground scenario with Atlantic winds some of the time, bringing wet and windy weather from off the Atlantic, but also the high pressure over Central Europe bringing up like warm southerly winds some of the time. I would have thought for that spring, but probably quite a mild a spring for 2002. Next up we've got the autumn of 2002, which had a CT of 11.0, so a lot of warm autumns in the early 2000s, and then the 2000s in general, as you're going to find out in a moment. The spring of 2003 was a very warm and dry spring, as a lot of you know, with high pressure over into the east of the country and sucking up those winds from the south like that, and that pattern continued into the summer as well. 2003, that was setting up the pattern of the summer. It's one of those rare occasions where you get a good spring and a good summer, and of course it turned very hot in early August of 2003 when we got the hottest temperature on record for the UK, which was something like 100 Fahrenheit or 37 or 38 point something degrees at Faversham in Kent. I do remember we got 100 Fahrenheit at Faversham in Kent, and that record was not beaten until the 25th of July 2019, when we got even higher. I think we got like maybe 101 Fahrenheit, 102 Fahrenheit, and I think we got like 38.7 degrees or something like that. Where was it now? I think it was I can't remember, but if it was some place in the southeast, anyway, some gardens or some weather station named Gardens or something, I forget. Maybe Kent Gardens, I can't remember. If it was like if it was only like, we were only like 1.3 degrees off, like 40 degrees. So it probably won't be too much longer now until we see a summer of until we reach 40 degrees in the UK. It could be in the next 10 years or so. We're off on a bit of a tangent there, as Gav often does. The next autumn is the autumn of 2004 with a CET of 11.0. The following spring was 2005 with high pressure northern blocking over Greenland and Iceland, low pressure to the west and high pressure also to the south. Looks a bit of a complicated pattern, sometimes bringing like westerly winds, other times bringing like north or northeasterly winds. But in a bit of a no man's land there. I'm not sure about that spring. Probably a lot of internal variation, really, for that one, I would guess. So next up, we've got the autumn of 2005, which had a CET of 11.5. So yeah, definitely a lot of autumns in the 2000s. The spring that followed was the spring of 2006, which looks to be quite a low pressure dominated spring with low pressure over to the east of the country, winds in from like an easterly direction, high pressure to the south. Probably quite an unsuited spring for the spring of 2006, and I think it was quite a cold spring as well in 2006, quite a cool spring, before the hot summer of the very hot summer of 2006, when we had our hottest month on record, which had a CET of 19.7 degrees in July of 2006, our hottest month on record. Next up is the autumn of 2009, which had a CET of 11.5. Oh yeah, the warmest autumn on record was 2006, by the way. Oh yeah, we should have spring 2007 on here. Where was spring 2007? Because autumn 2006 is in winter list, so don't know why. I think I've missed out 2007. I do apologise for this. I'm sure I had it up, but I don't know where it's gone. 2007. Well, let's just go back. And I get to see what you don't normally see, which is where you can input the years. Let's just put input 2007. I'll have to do a tutorial on how to use these charts. So this is where you can input the years and the months that you want. So let's do March to May 2007, because autumn 2006 was the hottest autumn on record in the UK with a CET of 12.6. Oops, that's not what I wanted. Let's just go back. So I'll change that to 500 millibars. There we go. And change that to anomaly. Map projection. Yeah, we'll just put it on all. That'll be fine. And yes, just create plot. So yeah, the spring of 2007 was a high pressure dominated spring with high pressure ridging through the country, low pressure shoved off to the north, jet stream on up to the north as well. It was particularly warm, and it was this reanalysis doesn't tell you the whole story though. It was very warm and dry in April 2007. I think it was probably like the warmest and driest April on record or something. It might have been beaten since, I'm not sure. But it was a very warm and dry and sunny April, and then complete flip in May 2007, which was a very cool and very wet month, and that pattern continued into the summer. So June and July 2007 were absolutely atrocious months, as a lot of you will remember, with flooding, deluge, flooding rains, very cool, very wet, absolutely atrocious months. And it did pick up a bit in August 2007, but it wasn't enough to save the summer, and it was a very, very poor summer in 2007. Okay, so where were we? Let's go through now. So 2000, 2002, 2003, 2006 and 2010. So the next warm autumn with a CET of 11 degrees or more, was the autumn of 2009 with a CET of 11.5. The spring that followed was the spring of 2010. Overall, quite a coldish spring with northern blocking, leftover pattern from the winter, because it was a very cold winter in 09 of 10, of course. Bringing down winds from north a lot of the time. That's quite a chilly spring in 2010. Next time we had an autumn of 11 degrees or more, it was in 2011. This was the second warmest autumn on record. I'm sure a lot of you remember the very mild autumn of 2011, which had a CET of 12.4. The spring that followed was the spring of 2012. Again, this doesn't tell you the whole story because it looks quite high pressure dominated, but it doesn't tell you the whole story. It was very warm and dry in March of 2012, but by the time we got to May 2012, by the time we got to April 2012, it turned cold and wet, and that pattern continued through much of May as well. It wasn't until the last week of May that it turned very warm and sunny for the last week of May, but it didn't last. And then by the time we got into June, the rain returned. It was a very wet and cool summer for basically the rest of the summer of 2012, with only very limited drier spells. So yeah, another atrocious summer in 2012. It's funny how we had like a front-loaded spring in both 2007 and 2012. With the warm and dry weather at the start of the spring in 2012, it was in March. In 2007, it was in April, and then by the time we get to the middle and latter stages of the spring, it turns cold and wet, and then that pattern continues for much of the summer. So it's funny how those 2 years are similar with the way the pattern deteriorates. Starts off well, deteriorates through the spring, and then it goes on through the summer. Okay, next up we have the autumn of 2014, which is another very warm autumn with a central England temperature of 12.1. So it's only 3 times we've had an autumn CET of above 12 degrees. It's happened 3 times, both in 2006, 2011 and 2014. So it's funny how we get 3 very warm autumns with a CET of 12 degrees or more in like only a few years apart. So yeah, very warm autumns in the 2000s. So it was a lot of very mild winters as well, of course. So anyway, the spring of 2015 looks like this. Overall, it's quite a westerly spring with low pressure to the north, high pressure to the south, winds in from the west. It was quite a westerly year. Was 2015. Had quite a westerly winter, westerly spring, westerly summer. Probably quite a westerly autumn as well, and then we had that exceptionally mild December in 2015, which had constantly dragging westerly winds. So it was exceptionally mild December and exceptionally wet for some parts of the country as well, with widespread flooding in places like Cumbria, and yeah, it's one of the most westerly years I've ever known for weather. Pretty bog standard really, but a lot of high pressure, jet stream pushed off to the north. It's particularly warm and dry in April 2015. But it was quite a cold May in 2015. I think it was like the coldest May since 1993, so it's quite a cold May in 2015. And a mediocre summer followed in 2015. Our next autumn is autumn of 11 degrees or more is the autumn of 2015 with a CET of 11.0. The spring of 2016 looks like this, so high pressure to the north, low pressure to the south, winds in from the east a lot of the time. Again, this doesn't tell you the whole story. It was quite a average March in 2016, with a couple of named storms. I remember that. April 2016 was quite a cold month, and it was one of those months where it was warm for a couple of days, and then it went cold for a couple of days, and warm for a couple of days, and cold for a couple of days. Overall, it was quite a cold month in April 2016, with a below average CET, and but then we had a warm and dry May in 2016. Next autumn with a CET of 11 degrees or more is actually no, the autumn of 2016. Actually, that shouldn't be included because we didn't. Autumn 2016 didn't have a CET of 11 degrees or more. So just I think I accidentally put in 2017 instead of spring 2007. I just closed that. The last time we had an autumn of 11 degrees or more before the autumn just gone was in 2020, and the spring of 2020 looks like this, with high pressure to the west, low pressure to the east, winds come down from the north a lot of the time. It was a fairly mild March or a fairly average March anyway, in March last year, but it was a cold April, the coldest April for 30 years. I didn't think it was that cold, and I think it was because it was also very dry and sunny April, which helped to make it feel warmer, all the extra sunshine. But temperature-wise, it was the coldest April for 30 years. And then we had a cool and wet May in 2021, very poor, disappointing month with little in the way of sunshine and warm weather. Only turned warm and sunny the last 3 days of the month. Before that, the month was like pretty much a total write-off, really, with like consistently below average temperatures and sunshine and above average rainfall. Overall, it was one of the coolest springs that we've had for some time. Quite a cold spring, actually, overall. So that's all the years. It's quite a big package of analogues, as you can tell, which is why I could only do it post 1950, otherwise there'll be too many years to input into the model. So this is how it looks with all years combined. This is how it looks overall. So we've got a strong northern blocking signal with all these analogues, which tends to favour quite a cold spring. Low pressure in the middle of the Atlantic, and winds tend to coming down from a north or northeasterly direction for quite a lot of these springs. So quite a relatively dry, quite a dry signal for these springs, but also quite a chilly signal with winds coming down from the north in a lot of these winters. So it seems that when you get a very warm autumn, you tend to have quite a chilly spring afterwards. That's what these analogues tell us. Now, what about the top 10 autumns, though? Top 10 warmest autumns. Let's see if we can narrow it down to the top 10. I haven't done this, so I'm going to pause the video and get that up for you right now. Okay, so I've done that for you. I've got the top 10 warmest autumns for you. So we've got autumn 2006. We've got autumn 2011. We've got autumn 2014. We've got autumn 2009. We've got autumn 2005. We've got autumn 1978. We've got autumn 1959. We've got autumn 1949. We've got autumn 2001. We've got autumn 1999. We've got the spring of 2007. We've got the spring of 2012, 2015, 2010, 2006, 1979, 1960, 1950, 2002, and 2000. This is how it looks when we have the top 10 warmest autumns and the springs that follow those autumns. And this is how the height wind analysis looks. So we have low pressure over the North Pole, high pressure over to the west of the country, and again probably bringing down like a northwesterly sort of flow. So the Atlantic is blocked off, but by that high pressure, but it probably means we're pulling down like northerly or northwesterly winds a lot of the time. So probably quite a cool signal for a lot of these springs. So I think we can gather from this that when you do have a very warm autumn, you tend to have quite a northerly or northwesterly spring a lot of the time, with a lot of northerly or northwesterly winds, and a lot of throwbacks to winter. And yeah, you do. I think what we can tell from these analogues is that when you do have a very warm autumn, you tend to have quite a dry but quite a cold spring, or quite a chilly spring anyway, after a warm autumn. So yeah, this is my first ever analogues update. So yeah, so hope you enjoyed the video. Please give it a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and yeah, this is my first time I've ever done an analogues update, so if I was a bit slow or a bit rusty, then do forgive me, because it was my first time doing it. I'm not familiar with the software and the model, so I had to figure it all out. So it took me quite a while, a bit of trial and error and watching tutorials on YouTube, and yeah, but figured it out in the end. So that's the main thing. So yeah, I thought it was most people didn't seem to mind, but I thought it was quite a big disappointment for me that Gav wasn't doing his spring updates this year. So I thought, why don't I do them instead? So yeah, you can't complain at that. So I hope no one complains about that, impersonating Gav or something like they did last time. But really, I'm not competing against Gav. I'm just complimenting Gav and doing videos when he doesn't do videos, and yeah. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed the video. Please subscribe to the channel, please give it a like if you enjoyed it, and yeah, please stay tuned for the next video, where we will be looking at December temperature and precipitation data. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to that, and I hope you are. So stay tuned then, but for this video, that's all for now. And thanks very much for watching. Goodbye. Peace.